Good morning. Today is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. There's an old song in Israel that has taken on new popularity, new meaning, and new urgency with the mood in Israel these days. And it is particularly appropriate as we prepare to begin tonight and tomorrow Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And the song is Al Nevakesh. Let us not ask. And some of the lyrics go as follows. Al Nevakesh hakol ledas. Al nistakrin legabe hamachar. Let us not ask to know it all. Let us not be curious of tomorrow. Lifamim shesiba lo nodas, yesh lifamim shenistar hadavar. Sometimes the reason is unknown. Sometimes something is hidden from us. Yesh dvarim nistarim lo navin lo neda. There are some things that are hidden, we will not understand or know them. Naseh gam dvarim shenirim bli siba, and we will do things that also seem to have no reason or explanation. Lo tzarich kol davar lachkor v'lish'ol. It is not necessary that every single thing should be explored and questioned. Lefamim gam mutar lo ladas akol. Sometimes it is permitted not to know it all. Daniel Gordis writes about how this song catches the mood in Israel now. He writes, how long is this going to go on? The war in Gaza, the hostages, the North, the West Bank, the political situation. What kind of a society will remain and emerge when the guns are silenced? Will we unite or split bitterly once again? Will anyone in power ever take responsibility for the worst catastrophe in the history of this country? Are there going to emerge new leaders, people we barely heard of or not heard of at all, who can not only rebuild, but take us to greater heights? Al na lishol. Sometimes we should not ask. This is more than a line from a song, Gordis writes. Accepting that we have to see this through even though we have no idea what will be when it's over is the only way to put one foot in front of the other. It's about rising again each morning with the sun, knowing that if those who came before us had stopped when things got unbearably sad, we wouldn't be here now to face sorrows that are not new to this country or to the people it was created to save. Lifamim gam mutar lo ladas hakol. Sometimes it's permitted not to know everything. It's true about the mood in Israel today, and it is certainly true about the Holocaust. Why? Why did it happen? How could God let it happen? How could people do this to another people? Yesh lefamim shesiba lo nadas. Sometimes the reason is unknown. Yesh lefamim shenistar hadavar. Sometimes something is hidden from us. God has decided that we are not to understand this in this world. Lifamim gam mutar lo ladas hakol. And sometimes it's mutar, it's permitted, it's allowed. We have to live with the fact that we will not know it all. We will not have the answers. But I do have two brief insights to share, not answers, but insights to give context for what Yom HaShoah can mean for us now when it occurs tonight and tomorrow. Two stories. Several years ago, a man named Adiel Coleman, 32 years old, lived in Israel. He was murdered in the Old City several years ago when he was returning home from work. He was the father of 4 children. A group of rabbis that I know went to visit his family when they were sitting Shiva. His father, Adiel's father, spoke about his son. I watched him just this past Shabbat in shul. Everyone who met, he grabbed warmly, smiling, people all around him. He was trained to work in special ed, hopefully to work with children with horse riding therapy. That's what his father said about him during Shiva. His mother showed the visitors photos on her phone, and she said, not literally, Adayin Chai. He's still alive, meaning I can see the photos of him. And then a sweet little girl, 9 years old, her name is Noam, she came into the room. A daughter of Adiel. And her savta, her grandmother, embraced her. So she said to her granddaughter, a little bit in a light manner, so how come you aren't in school today? And Noam answers, because I'm in Shiva, because her father was killed. And her grandmother said to her, well, that's a good reason not to go to school. And then she says to her granddaughter, this 9-year-old Noam, she says, tell these rabbis what your private tefillah was yesterday. What did you pray for yesterday? And this 9-year-old girl, Noam, said, my private tefillah, my private prayer was, Sha'ani atzliach b'li Abba, that I should succeed without my father. I heard that story from my friend and colleague, Rabbi Reuven Tradburks. And the truth is, we, the Jewish people, have had to succeed without 6 million men, women, children. Many of us have had to succeed without having grandparents, without having parents, without having spouses who were murdered in the Holocaust, without having siblings, without having children who were killed. And I think we have succeeded as a Jewish people with lots of pain and lots of exceptions. But I think that we have succeeded. Though it's impossible to imagine, and I've been thinking about this recently, where we would be without those drastic losses. What would the Jewish people look like today if we had gone through World War II like any other group, not singled out as we were by Nazi Germany? It's impossible to imagine. I assumed there would be ways in which we would be much better and healthier. I also assumed that there are certain strengths and abilities that we have developed, resilience, the ability of rebirth, that we may not have worked so hard to achieve had that not happened. And likewise, this is true for thousands of Israelis today. Not just Noam, but thousands and thousands of children, spouses, siblings, parents, somehow have to be able to try to pray this prayer, Shani Atzliach Bli Abba, or Ima. I have to be able to succeed without my father, my mother, my son, my daughter, my sibling, my child. I want to share one last story. This is a story that I heard from Emuna Klein Barnoy. She's a woman who lives in Yerushalayim. And she has a son, a little boy named Uri. And Uri goes to daycare. And one day they were in a park, and Emuna, this woman, was speaking to another woman, her friend, who also has a child, a daughter, in the same daycare. Okay, so there are two kids in daycare in Jerusalem, and the two mothers are sitting together talking while they're watching their kids play. Now, while they're talking, this other woman receives a WhatsApp from her grandmother. And she shows it to her friend Emuna, and they're kind of laughing because her grandmother had sent her a WhatsApp text in Hungarian. Her grandmother is Hungarian, lives in Israel now. And Emuna says, wow, it's interesting, my mother's also Hungarian. And she says to her friend sitting next to her, where's your grandmother from? And she answers, Chust. And Emuna says, oh, wow, my grandmother was also from Chust. And it's interesting because Chust was a very small town in Hungary. Most of the Jewish community there was murdered by the Nazis. There were very few survivors. What are the chances that two women sitting together next to each other in Jerusalem, watching their kids play in a park in Jerusalem, that both of their grandmothers survived and came from the same town in Chust in Hungary? So Emuna says to her friend, what did your grandmother do in Chust? What kind of work did she do? And she says, well, she says that my great-grandmother, my grandmother was young, but my great-grandmother in Chust, she worked for a shetelmacher, a wig maker. There was a little business in this town of Chust to make shetels, to make wigs for the Jewish women who wore wigs at that time. So the woman says, my great-grandmother worked for the shetelmacher in Chust. And she says, and what did your great-grandmother do? And she says, Emuna says, my great-grandmother was Hanshi Rosenfeld. She was the shetelmacher. She was the shetelmacher. So one of the women, their great-grandmother, owned the business, and the other one sitting next to her, never knew the story, worked for her in this business in Chust. Now, listen to this. The shetelmacher, the great-grandmother, of Emunah, Hanshi Rosenfeld. She came to Auschwitz with her daughter. That's the grandmother of the woman who's sitting in the park. Her little boy's playing, Uri. When she arrived in Auschwitz, at the same time as 5 women who worked in her wig factory. And these 6 women, the owner of the company, it's a little bitty company, you understand. The owner of the company and the 5 workers, these 6 women, they formed a mutual support group in Auschwitz. They helped one another get things like a little bit of extra food to avoid starvation. And they survived. All 6 of these women survived. The Jewish community of their town was almost completely wiped out. But these 6 women who were so closely bonded, these Hungarian Shetelmachers, they survived. And they would have reunions. Their children moved to Israel, and they would have reunions from time to time. And their story has been passed on by word of mouth to their families for 5 whole generations. So the 2 women sitting in the park did not know each other, but they had both heard the exact same stories. Making shetels in Chust, going to Auschwitz, creating this bond of 6 women, surviving together. And now, 5 generations later, the great-great-grandson of Hanshi Rosenfeld, the Shetelmacher, he's a little boy named Uri. And he goes to daycare together with a little girl. And that little girl is the great-great-granddaughter of Perry Kretz, who worked for Hanshi Rosenfeld making shetels. And these great-great-grandchildren have become such close friends. And Luna would say, sometimes I can't get Uri to get out of the house to go to daycare. But she says to him, you know, you're going to see your friend that you like so much, and that's what gets him out of the house. And after 5 generations, these 2 children are such close friends. Now listen. And she ends with this. If only I could go back to those days in Auschwitz, when our great-grandmothers crowded together in the bunk for warmth, and tell them that the prophecies were true, that the promises God made to the Jewish people were true, and that the day would come when, as the prophet says, the streets of the city of Jerusalem will be filled with boys and girls playing in her streets. If only we could tell them then how this is going to work out. But it is true. The prophecies of redemption are gradually, slowly coming true in our day. My friends, I wish you a good day, a meaningful, solemn, but ultimately forward-thinking Yom HaShoah tonight and tomorrow. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.